The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the IP, the International Property, or I think that's what it's called, IP stands for. Is there Integral Property? IP, let's go with that. I know it's important. So one of the things that caught us out big time was when this project was being made. It was very difficult at the time to contact in any way members of the World of Darkness team, or at the time White Wolf, and there had been a change where they'd gone to Paradox Entertainment. There was By Night Studios had changed hands, so it was no longer underneath or owned by White Wolf. It was then sold as an IP to somebody else who then ran By Night Studios, a team that ran it. And in a nutshell, it was all over the show. And also that White Wolf itself, due to, I believe, this is just me from looking from an observer out there, White Wolf's reputation due to members of the team or people that were involved in it at the time wasn't particularly great. So what happened was the White Wolf was removed and it went to World of Darkness underneath Paradox. So yeah, there was a lot of confusing changes going on around the time. And it meant that it was really difficult to kind of figure out what we were doing wasn't going to get taken away from us. Now, this was because there had been accounts in the past of other LARPs that were using let's just go with, make it easy for myself, with World of Darkness IP that had legal action taken against them by World of Darkness because of the use of that IP. And this was a major blow when it came to the actual it was one of the biggest blows to the LARP scene for Vampire, because the aftermath of this was that a lot of Vampire LARPers splintered away. They didn't like how the company had handled things. The community was very split and it was already fractured. So a lot of LARPs just disappeared, died out, etc. And yeah, it was a very confusing time for someone like myself who wanted to ensure that what we were doing was above board and we weren't going to get in the shit, because we were looking to do a subscription as a payment method for our games to help with budgeting for venue hire, etc., etc. And due to us taking an income from our players that was potentially above what the venue cost would be on props and all of this stuff, because we were trying to make a piggy bank. And in that piggy bank, we were taking a percentage of it at the end of every year to give to local charities. And we were also then utilising that piggy bank for the next year to allow for growth of the game, bigger venues, etc., etc. But it meant that we were holding money. And because we were holding money, I didn't know if that would get me in trouble, as we were making profit from somebody else's IP. And for a long time, when we started out the project, it was very nerve-wracking because I didn't know what to do. I'd never done this kind of stuff before. I didn't know the legal jargon behind it all and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, at the start of it, we wanted to go for to make a charitable organisation, meaning that the company was going to be a charitable company. I think it's called a charitable company. But we then worked out that actually that just wouldn't fit with what we were trying to do. We were forced or had to go for a public house. I'm trying to think of the bloody name of the company that it come under. But anyway, we had to come under like a lot of other companies do, and that's why. Yeah. But anyway, so it was nerve-wracking at the start trying to create this game, and then to start off with, we were on purposely not putting in references to things like Camarilla, Sabat, the names of the clans, anything like that in any of our, like the website design we were doing and all of that, because, you know, we didn't want, if the project was to be like come under scrutiny and all the rest of it, we wanted to at least stand a chance of being able to hold on to the work that we'd done so far and just pivot to making the game not in any way World of Darkness. But yeah, so anyway, it was confusing. And then Dark Pact, which was kind of around at the time, but it wasn't really. Dark Pact came out. And Dark Pact was something that had a list of kind of criteria and instructions that if you abided by them, you know, you could utilize their material, the IP, without any repercussions. And if you are creating a, you know, you're doing a project for a LARP or something like that, and you haven't created that world, basically, that world yourself, that system, and you're utilizing somebody else's and you're going to be making profit from it, it's definitely worth trying to find where you stand legally doing so, because the last thing you want to do is spend all of that time, money and effort creating this LARP system for somebody else to come along, see it and go, wait a minute, that's mine. You're just ripping off everything I've done and you're making money from it. And the first thing they're going to do is come at you because they think you're literally taking away from them. So yeah, definitely it is something that's important. So yeah, Dark Pact for Vampire at least covered off some of it, but it was still confusing. So years later, World of Darkness then created a Discord server where people could get together that were content creators or modders, you name it. And it was a Discord where everybody could go and ask direct questions and etc. etc. That was a really good thing that they did, because it then allowed, you know, it gave everybody that was involved in it an avenue to ask direct questions to World of Darkness, you know, and at least it would cover you legally that you've reached out and you've tried to ask, and if you didn't have the response, you know what I mean, at least you've tried the avenues. So that was good of them. So towards the end of the project, it became a lot easier to understand where we stood, etc., etc. And there was definitely some clear guidelines when it came to LARP and all of that. Now, I suspect that if the game had started to produce, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of profit, I suspect that there would have a conversation would have happened between us and World of Darkness. But at the time when it was just running costs with a little bit of profit to make the game bigger and better, I don't believe that World of Darkness would have taken offence to it and probably would have tried their way to support it eventually, as long as it was V5. Sorry, that I don't mean that as a dig in any way. It's just what it is. They wouldn't be promoting this RLARP at the time unless it was V5, in my opinion. Sorry, that was rude. I shouldn't have just dug like that. But anyway, so yeah, the idea being, though, as I say, is make sure when you're creating your LARP or you're creating, you're doing your project, if there is an IP involved in some way, look into it. Reach out, send emails, etc., etc. And don't be afraid. Big companies, what you perceive to be massive companies aren't. Like, I was amazed when I saw behind the doors of By Night Studios and got involved in them. For years, I thought By Night Studios was a massive company, like with a head office and, like secretaries and, I just in my head, I always imagined them to be this, big organisation, and they're not. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into what they are. That's behind those doors. So I don't want to. But they're not what I thought they were. So that was an eye opener, and also that changed my view, like to a lot of companies. That it. Yeah, I think I grew up at that point. I think is the way to put it. Like it was interesting, definitely interesting. But yeah, so I thought this video would be semi-useful to individuals, just because it's one of those things where it's something that's not really discussed, but it has come up in the past with some negative events that have taken place. I mean, look how in recent news there was the thing that happened with Wizards of the Coast and to do with the IP use for theirs, and subtle changes to that IP use and how that affected content creators and game runners and all kinds of stuff. And now I believe that that's been changed due to community feedback, etc. But yeah, and that's because I think that's because they actually changed the ruling of their document. There was one in front beforehand, but then they altered it. But that's the risk you take with all of this kind of stuff. So my final bit of advice: if I could do it again, if I could go back to the start of the project, I don't think I would have made this utilising the World of Darkness IP. I think I'd have just made my own standalone LARP. Because if you look at, if I look at successful LARP systems, that LARPs that have survived, continued, growing, etc., they're all created from standalone, homemade world settings, campaigns, etc. And I think there's two reasons that stand out to me that are why. One, player expectation. If a player has access to the world settings information, they have access to all of the same information you do as the creator, that player knows too much. And so if I pick up a World of Darkness book and I read it and I'm inspired by it and I put aspects of that into my game, there is nothing to say that one of the players has done the same. But what they're expecting is to see the aspects that they liked in your game. So what then happens is that, one, you can't really surprise your players, and two, that what they expect to see is far greater than if you created it all yourself, because they got no idea. They're excited to see something new. They're not excited waiting to see the thing they want to see because they saw it in a book and they want to see that now in the game. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, that's the first reason, that you player expectation is vastly decreased, and as you develop your world, then the players, you can filter that information to your players as it grows. So if you don't want dragons in your game because they cost a fortune to make costumes for or do correctly, etc., you don't have to put dragons in your game. But if you were running a LARP based off of the IP of Game of Thrones, well, going to be some dragons in there. And you know what I mean? It's, yes, you can have the dragons as not appearing, but then your players may be disappointed because they came to your LARP thinking there'd be dragons. Does that make sense? So if you'd have just made the IP, if you'd have just made your game like Game of Thrones, with factions and the way they interact and a main seat of power and courts around it and all that. You can be inspired by Game of Thrones, but at no way do you say your game is in any way tied to the Game of Thrones IP. And then, of course, the second reason that I believe that the most successful LARPs have created their own world settings is because of legal ramifications. And it all it takes is for them to go, you're making some good money over there, we want a piece of that. And you can't do a lot, because the making the massive changes to your game to remove the elements of the IP will just destroy your game. You might as well just start again. And so I think, like I say, if I was to do this again, I would have created my own system, my own world setting, and would it have been about vampires? Maybe, but I think it's a risk. It's definitely a risk doing a large scale or looking to go beyond parlor LARP, as in 30 to 50 kind of players. Looking to go beyond that, utilising somebody else's IP is risky. Because if your game does blow up and become really popular, there could be legal ramifications. Plus, your players will always expect more elements of that IP to be in your game. So, yeah, that's that. Hopefully, that's some sound advice. Did us using the World of Darkness IP throughout the project cause us issues? Hell yeah. Was it very stressful at times? Yep. And was it in any way beneficial that there was an existing community to kind of utilise for support of the game, etc., etc.? To be honest, not really. All of the support, well, I'm not going to say all of the support. Let's go with 85% of the support that was given to this project came from friends and families and people that I'd known personally. Only 15% came from outside of that. And I don't, to be honest, I think only, I don't know, maybe even half of that 15, maybe 7% of the actual support came from the vampire community. So the loss of that community support, if I'd have done a different game setting, I don't think it would have had a massive impact. And I'm talking about support through funding for the game, helping create the game, all of that jazz. That very little. I mean, I got people that commented and a lot of people that complained that some of the stuff I was doing wasn't to their liking, or that I needed to change things and do things. That goes back to the whole, stick to your guns. But yeah, I feel there wouldn't have been a massive loss. I didn't get any support from Paradox, World of Darkness, that's for sure. There was not a single video or post or anything. Jason Carr was fantastic. I'm name dropping here. Jason Carr was fantastic because he actually does actively comment and like posts that is made by the community. But outside of Jason, no idea. And so for that way, did I get support from the IP? No. Did I get massive support from the community that existed? No. So yeah, it's one of those things where fuck it. I'm going to categorically say at the end of this video, I believe that you are better off creating your own world and your own setting than you are to try to utilize an IP of an existing successful brand, because you're opening yourself up to difficulties. And honestly, look at LARPs within your area and look at the LARPs that are successful and that are growing and doing well, and look to see if any of them are utilizing an IP of something that is existing in the world. So, for example, a Game of Thrones, a Harry Potter, a World of Darkness, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or anything, a Mad Max, anything that are directly tied, so characters, etc., appear from that in those games. Even Dungeons and Dragons, any LARPs that actually have Dungeons and Dragons characters, like they are set in Neverwind, or they're set with within Baldur's Gate, or they've got Drizzt in it, on anything like that, like direct IP. See if you've got any LARPs in your area that are successful, that are utilising that. If you do, please put them in the comments, because I'd love to see what those LARPs are. But I've got a real strong suspicion that there aren't any. And yeah, so there you go. Is it international property? Integral property? Anyway, IP. Yeah, have fun with that. But yeah, hopefully you found this video useful and enjoyable. Yeah, I do genuinely love you all, and I'll see you again soon.